I notice something about the person watching this right now. Not a category, not a demographic. Something more specific than that, a quality that registers before you've even opened your mouth in a room. A kind of patient precision. Like someone who has learned to move through spaces carefully, always aware of exactly how much they're carrying, and exactly how fragile the container around them has become. From the outside, you look assembled, capable. You're the person other people lean on without realizing they're leaning. Nothing is technically wrong. The life is held together. And the performance is so consistent, so thoroughly convincing, that somewhere along the way you stopped being able to tell where the performance ended and where you began. But I'm not talking about what you look like from the outside. I'm talking about the gap. The gap between what you look like standing in a room and what's actually happening in the center of your chest when you're standing there. The gap between the person you present at work, at the dinner table, in the text thread, and the version of you that comes home afterward and sits in a quiet that has no comfortable name. That gap. I've been watching it for a long time. In people who find their way to content like this. In myself, and what I've learned is that the gap isn't evidence of something broken. The gap is the most important piece of information in your life right now. There's something underneath what I just said that I'm not going to get to for a few minutes. Something specific about what that gap is actually pointing toward and what's waiting on the other side of it. Something about why the people who have carried this particular gap the longest aren't the most damaged, they're the most prepared. Stay with me, because by the time we get there, the last several years of your life are going to reorganize themselves into a different shape entirely. The easy answer for why you feel the way you feel is that you were made different. And that's true, but it's not the whole truth. The part it leaves out is the part that explains why being different has cost you as much as it has. And that's what this is actually about. Let me tell you what the inheritance looks like before I tell you what it produces. There's a trait you carry that didn't start with you. I'm not being spiritual for the sake of it. I mean something you can actually trace. A sensitivity that runs deeper than it should for someone your age, in a family that never quite knew what to do with it. A knowing that arrives before evidence does. A hunger for something true and real that the people around you learned to call too much, too intense, too interior, and a refusal, quiet, persistent, undramatic, to fully cooperate with the version of the world everyone else seemed to find sufficient. You noticed it early. You might not have had a word for it then, but you remember the moment. Maybe you were 8, maybe 11, sitting in a room with the people who were supposed to know you best, and something in you went very still. Because you felt something in the air that nobody else was tracking. A tension underneath a smile. A grief sitting just below the surface of a normal conversation. A decision being made in the unspoken space between people who were pretending everything was fine, and you tracked it. Quietly, without telling anyone, because you'd already figured out that naming what you noticed made people uncomfortable. You weren't imagining it. You were never imagining it. That's the first thing I need to say to you. The people around you, the ones who loved you, who raised you, who would have picked up at any hour, they saw something in you they didn't have a category for. And because they didn't have a category for it, they did what people do with things they can't name. They managed it. Your sensitivity got redirected into something smaller. Your perception got framed as difficulty. Your depth got compressed down into a shape that could fit inside the rooms they already understood. And you did what children do when the people they love are uncomfortable with what they carry. You learned to translate yourself. You learned which parts to show and which parts to fold inward. You learned to be palatable. And here's what that cost you. Do you know what it costs to translate yourself for 30 years? To become so fluent in the language of other people's comfort that you forget you have your own. You get very good at showing up. Exceptional at holding things together. You become the person other people describe as strong, as capable, as the one who always knows what to do. And inside all of that, something waits. Something with its arms folded. Something that was there before the translation started, that has been patient, that has not moved. That waiting thing, that's the inheritance. That's what I'm talking about. Because the sensitivity you were told to compress is equipment. The knowing that arrives before evidence does isn't a quirk of your nervous system, it's discernment. The hunger for something real and true that made every surface-level relationship feel like a slow suffocation. That's not a flaw in your design. That's the frequency of your assignment pressing against a container that was never built to hold it. And the fact that the people closest to you never recognized it for what it was, that's not their failure. That's a structural reality. The inheritance didn't start with your family. It passes through them. What you carry is older than any genealogy can trace. The specific convergence of sensitivity, perception, depth, and this relentless hunger for what's real, all of it was in motion before you were born. You didn't arrive into a random situation. You arrived into a prepared one. Now let me tell you what that actually means for where you are right now. Let me tell you about 3 years in a job that looked completely fine from the outside. I was 27 when I took the role, project manager at a mid-size company, salaried, responsible. I'd decided the time for waiting on something else was over, and this was what serious adults did with their lives. And I was good at it. I want to be clear about that, because this isn't a story about incompetence. I earned trust. I earned responsibility. I performed competence at a level that made nobody suspect anything was wrong. I held things together in rooms that would have come apart without me. I did the job. 3 years. Let me tell you about 3 years in a job that looked completely fine from the outside. I was 27 when I took it, project manager at a mid-size company, salaried. Sable. I had decided that waiting for something else was finished, and this was what serious people did with their lives, and I was good at it. I want to say that clearly, because this isn't a story about falling apart. I earned trust. I earned responsibility. I held rooms together that would have come undone without me. I did the job well. And for 3 years I walked the same commute, came home to the same apartment, sat through the same meetings, while some quiet part of me sat in the corner of every single one of those rooms with its arms folded. Not angry. Not restless. Just waiting. I told myself the waiting was maturity. I told myself that the numbness I felt at my desk, the way a whole afternoon could pass and I couldn't tell you what I actually thought about any of it. I told myself that was what growing up felt like, that the part of me pressing against the walls had finally learned to settle. That everyone felt this way in their 20s. That was the false belief I carried. That God had gone quiet because I'd done something wrong. That a numbness was punishment, not preparation. That I'd failed some invisible test, and I was being held in place until I figured out what it was. Then one Tuesday night at 2 in the morning, I couldn't sleep. I was sitting on the edge of the bed in the dark. I reached for my phone to check the time. The clock read 2:22. And something in my chest broke open, not dramatically. Not with a voice or a vision, just a crack. Like the first sound of something frozen starting to give, like a bone that had been set wrong for years quietly agreeing to heal. I sat with that for a long time. In the dark, not moving. Pause. In the days after, something became clear to me. The numbness was never punishment. The silence was never absence. The inability to feel at home in that apartment, that commute, that version of myself I'd been performing with such precision, that wasn't a spiritual failure. That was preparation. That was what it feels like when who you actually are is incompatible with where you've been placed, and your body has finally stopped pretending otherwise. What I lost in those 3 years was the belief that working harder inside the system would eventually make the system feel like home. That belief is gone now. I don't grieve it, but I name it because you need to know what got stripped away in that season wasn't a gift being taken. It was a lie being removed, and the stripping wasn't punishment. It was God making room. What came out of that season, what I'm about to get into, I've never said it quite like this before, because it turns out the 3 years of silence, the same desk, the same walls, the crack at 2:22 in the morning, none of it was random. Every second of it was positioning, and by the time we get to where this is going, I think you're going to understand why what I'm about to say could only find you now, after what you've already walked through. Not a moment before. Here's the thing most people never get told about: the inheritance, the trait you carry, the sensitivity, the depth, the knowing, the hunger for something real. It doesn't just come with a calling attached to it. It comes with a counterpart. I don't mean that the way it sounds at first. I'm not talking about romance in the way that word has been worn down by every story that ever told you love is electricity, drama being chosen by someone who makes you forget yourself. That's not what I mean. What I mean is something structural, something that operates at the level of architecture, not feeling. Every genuine calling has a weight to it. A specific load-bearing requirement. Some assignments one person can carry alone, others were designed for two, not because either one is insufficient, but because the assignment itself requires a combined weight. Two people whose inner architecture, when brought together, produces something neither could produce separately. Not addition, combination. The way two fires close enough together don't just become two fires in the same place. They become something operating at a completely different magnitude. The counterpart to your calling isn't someone who completes you in the sentimental sense. They're someone whose frequency was built to anchor yours, to double your structural authority, to offer something you've never had, something you may not even fully know you've been missing, because you've carried everything alone for so long that the absence of support has started to feel like the baseline. And here's what connects back to the inheritance, the sensitivity, the depth, the refusal to settle for anything that isn't fully real. That's exactly the frequency that draws this kind of counterpart forward, not the performance you put on in meetings. Not the version of yourself assembled for the commute. The actual you, the one sitting in the corner with its arms folded. The one that's been waiting. That version of you is a signal. It's been broadcasting for years, and the person it's broadcasting toward has been in their own quiet quarantine, held apart from you by the same careful, deliberate structure that kept you from the wrong connections. Not as punishment. As protection. The counterpart to your calling isn't someone who completes you in the sentimental sense. They're someone whose frequency was built to anchor yours, to double what you're able to carry, to offer something you've never had and maybe never even noticed you were missing because you've been carrying everything alone for so long that the absence of support started to feel like just the way things are. And the inheritance I was talking about earlier, the sensitivity, the depth, the refusal to settle for anything that doesn't feel fully real, that's exactly what calls this specific person forward. Not the version of you that performs in meetings. Not the assembled version you wear for the commute. The actual you, the one with its arms folded in the corner. The one that's been waiting. That version of you is a signal. It's been broadcasting for years, and the person it's been broadcasting toward has been held in a kind of mirror quarantine, kept apart from you by the same deliberate structuring that kept you apart from the wrong connections. Not as punishment, as protection. The same God who stripped a false belief out of my chest at 2:22 on a Tuesday morning, who let me sit in 3 years of silence until I could no longer mistake the numbness for home. That same God has been working on the other side of this, keeping someone in preparation, keeping their frequency clean, preventing the wrong convergence so that when the right one arrives, there's no contamination. No residue from the old timeline bleeding into the new one. Both of you have been in a kind of quarantine, and the quarantine is ending. What I want you to actually hear inside that, not just receive it as information, but really hear it, is this: the quarantine ending doesn't mean you need to do something. That's the whole point. The way God has structured this convergence doesn't require your engineering. You don't need to join anything, search anywhere, or heal yourself into some finished version before they arrive. The moment your frequency settles into its actual stillness, not the performance, not the assembled version, not the coat you've been wearing since before you can remember, the lock clicks. This is already in motion, but here's the part I need you to stay with, because it's the part nobody addresses directly. And it's the part that can get in the way of everything I just described. You've been the strong one for so long that being genuinely received, supported, cherished, resourced by someone whose only assignment is to hold what you carry without taking anything from you in the process is going to feel wrong, not a little uncomfortable. Wrong at the level of the nervous system. The old survival identity is going to register ease as danger. It's going to scan the situation for the cost. It's going to start building a case for why this can't be real, why there must be a catch, why the person who shows up without the familiar weight of effort and management and labor is probably just a more sophisticated version of what's already burned you. Pause. I want you to know that response in advance, so that when it comes, you recognize it for what it is, not discernment. Not wisdom. Not your spirit giving you accurate data about incoming danger. A survival program that outlived the season it was built for, and the single most important thing you can do right now, not tomorrow, not after you've sorted more of your life out, is start learning the difference between those two things. Because the person who's coming isn't going to look like what your nervous system was trained to expect. They're going to feel easy in a way that's unfamiliar, safe in a way that has no drama attached, present without requiring anything from you in exchange for that presence. And every alarm in your old system is going to fire at exactly that moment and tell you to run. The only job you have is to recognize that alarm and stay. So let me say something about what readiness actually is. Because the word gets used like it means finished. Like it means you've resolved every wound, healed every pattern, and arrived carrying nothing that still needs work. That's not what readiness means. That's not what's being asked of you. Readiness is not completion. Readiness is posture. There's a specific posture I want to name, because most people who carry what you carry have been standing in exactly the wrong one without realizing it. Not because they're doing something wrong. Because the posture that kept them safe for years is the same one that will keep what's coming from landing. You've been standing at a slight angle. Just enough of an angle that the deepest part of you stays protected. Slightly sideways in every room, every conversation, every relationship that got close enough to need a real answer from you. You learned to do this so early that it stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like personality. It stopped feeling like armor and started feeling like skin. Here's what that posture costs you now with what's approaching. It costs you the direct hit, because what's moving toward you isn't going to navigate around a sideways stance. It can't. The geometry doesn't work that way. Readiness is turning to face it directly. I know that sounds simple. It isn't simple. Turning forward when every cell in your body has been rewired to stand sideways is one of the most specific and difficult things a person like you will ever be asked to do. But it's the thing. It's the whole thing. Everything else is secondary. So what does turning forward actually require? Not in theory, not in the language of healing culture. What does it require this week in your actual life? The first thing it requires is an honest look at what's still occupying the space. Not your past wounds, not your unresolved history. God isn't asking you to be a finished product before this arrives. What's being asked is something more immediate, whether there's anything currently living in the room that you've already recognized as wrong and kept anyway. A connection you've maintained out of obligation, a situation that's been draining more than it returns for longer than you've admitted. A version of yourself you're still performing for people who wouldn't survive the honest one. Those things aren't just emotionally costly. They're physically occupying space that's been designated for something else. So what does turning forward actually look like in practice? Not in theory. Not in healing culture language. What does it actually require this week, in the life you're living right now? The first thing it requires is an honest look at what's still taking up space. Not your past wounds. Not every unresolved thing from childhood. God isn't asking you to be a finished product before any of this arrives. What he's asking is whether there's something currently living in the room that you've already recognized as wrong and kept anyway. A connection you're maintaining out of obligation. A situation that's been draining you far longer than it's returned anything. A version of yourself you keep performing for people who probably couldn't handle the honest one. Those things aren't just emotionally exhausting. They're physically occupying space that's been set aside for something else. You can't receive what's coming while the room is still full of what you already know needs to go. This isn't about perfection. God isn't requiring an empty, spotless life before anything new can walk through the door. He's asking you to cooperate with what you already know. You know what's taking up space. You've known for longer than you've let yourself admit. The audit isn't a revelation, it's permission to act on what you can already see. The second thing readiness requires is learning to receive something without immediately turning it into work. And this is the one that will actually test you. Because it's the one that will feel the most wrong. When someone offers you something with no cost attached, your first instinct is going to be to find the cost. Not because you're broken. Because every relational exchange you grew up inside had a hidden ledger. Because the people who gave you things most consistently were usually the ones who presented the bill later in a way that quietly rewrote what the gift had ever been. You learned to read the fine print before the ink dried. You learned to scan an open hand for what it was eventually going to need from you. That wasn't paranoia. That was survival. Calibrated, earned, accurate for the world you were navigating at the time. But here's where it becomes a problem. The person who's coming doesn't have a hidden ledger. The ease isn't a trap. The presence isn't a setup. The support isn't quietly accumulating into a debt that'll get called in at the worst possible moment. And your nervous system has never actually been inside a dynamic like that, which means it has no category for it. So it's going to build one, and because it has no other template, the category it builds is going to read the ease as manipulation. It's going to call the safety a performance. It's going to sit inside something real and keep waiting for the reveal that never comes, and that waiting, over time, will start to corrode the very thing it thought it was protecting. This is the specific work of readiness for someone with your history. Not healing old wounds in the abstract. Learning to let something land without immediately taking it apart to look for the mechanism. Let it land. That's the instruction. It sounds small. Receive it as large. Pause. I know some of you are watching this thinking it's idealistic, that I'm describing something that doesn't actually exist. That every person who has ever shown up speaking the language of safe and present and real eventually revealed the cost, and that the only sustainable position is the one you've already landed on. Expect nothing. Need no one. I've thought that too. I've sat inside that conclusion and built a structure around it that felt indistinguishable from wisdom. So I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just going to say this: the person I'm describing isn't a fantasy. They're not something culture sells. They're the result of a specific process that God has been running in two people at the same time, in parallel for the same duration. What you've been walking through alone, they've been walking through alone. The same stripping, the same silences, the same slow accumulation of discernment through the same kind of cost. They're not arriving untested. They're arriving having crossed the same desert on a different road, carrying something that, when you finally see it, fits with what you carry in a way nothing else ever has. That's not a fantasy. That's architecture. Now, I want to tell you what it actually feels like when two people with this kind of formation find each other. Because the mythology gets it wrong. The mythology says fireworks. Immediate certainty, an overwhelming knowing that floods you the moment they walk in. And sometimes there's something immediate, but the truer account, the one that more closely matches what this kind of meeting actually feels like, is quieter than that. And more disorienting. It feels like recognition, not excitement. Recognition, the way you recognize something you've always known. The way a word in a language you haven't spoken in years still sits perfectly on your tongue. There's no scrambling, no performance, no version of yourself you need to assemble before you arrive. You show up, and something in you goes still in a way that's completely different from going numb. Stillness without guardedness. Quiet without absence. You'll be fully in the room, possibly for the first time in longer than you can trace. And that's going to feel unfamiliar. I want to stay with that for a moment. The feeling of being fully present in a room is going to feel strange to you. The absence of the glass between you and the moment isn't going to feel like relief right away. It's going to feel strange, not painful. Strange. Like a coat you've worn so long that the first warm day comes and you don't need it, and you keep reaching for it anyway. You'll reach for the glass. You'll try to rebuild the distance. You'll catch yourself starting to perform the slightly sideways version of yourself that feels like home, and you'll have to make a deliberate choice to stand straight. That choice, that quiet, specific, deliberate choice, is what this whole conversation has been building toward. It's not glamorous. There's no mountaintop moment with music behind it. It's a small, daily decision to stop treating safety like a threat. That's the work. That's what's being asked of you right now. Not a dramatic overhaul, not a complete reconstruction of yourself before anything can proceed. Just this: when the safety arrives, don't run. And that's going to feel unfamiliar. I want to sit with that for a moment. The feeling of being fully in a room, actually in it, is going to feel strange. The absence of that glass between you and the moment is going to feel strange. Not painful, strange, like a coat you've worn so long that when the weather finally changes and you don't need it anymore, you keep reaching for it anyway. You'll reach for the glass. You'll try to rebuild the distance. You'll catch yourself starting to perform that slightly sideways version of yourself that feels like home, and you'll have to make a deliberate choice to stand straight. That deliberate choice is what this whole conversation has been building toward. It's not glamorous. There's no mountaintop moment, no music swelling behind it. It's a quiet, specific, daily decision to stop treating safety like a threat. That's the work. That's what's being asked of you right now. Not a dramatic overhaul, not a complete reconstruction of everything before anything can move forward. Just this: when the safety arrives, don't run. There's a lamp left on in a room. That image has been sitting here since the beginning, and I want to close with it now. A lamp left on in what looks like an empty room. You've walked past it many times. You've looked through the window at it and thought, someone should turn that off. Nobody's in there. It's wasting light, but you never considered that the lamp was left on deliberately. That the light isn't wasted. That the room isn't empty. That the lamp is burning because something in the design of that space required it to stay lit so that when you finally walked through the door, you wouldn't be arriving into darkness. You've been that lamp for a long time, burning in what looked to everyone around you like an empty room. keeping the light on in a space most people walked past without even glancing through the window. And the question was never whether the lamp was real. Pause. The lamp is real. The light is real. The only question was whether anyone was ever going to walk through that door who knew what the room was actually for. That person is coming. Not as a rescue, not as a solution to the parts of your life that still need your own hands on them. They're not arriving to carry what's yours to carry. They're arriving to stand beside it so you don't have to carry it alone the way you've been carrying it. There's a difference between someone who takes the weight and someone who anchors you so completely that the weight stops requiring every last bit of your energy just to stay upright. That's the counterpart. That's the specific design of this. Not a replacement for what you are, a complement to the exact frequency of what you are. And your only job, the only thing I want you to leave here with, is to be ready. Not ready meaning finished. Not ready meaning resolved, or smaller, or more palatable, or less intense than you actually are. Ready meaning the room is clear of what you already know needs to go. Ready meaning you've made the decision, before the arrival, to stay when the alarm fires. Ready meaning you've given yourself permission to let something land that doesn't come with a hidden cost to discover later. Ready meaning you've stopped treating your own depth as something you owe people an apology for. That's the whole instruction. It's not a complicated one, but it's a specific one, and it asks more of your nervous system than any complicated instruction ever would. I want to pray over you before you leave here. Not for performance, because I believe what I just said, and I want to say it to God on your behalf as well. Father, I come before you on behalf of the specific person who is still in this room, the one who has held things upright for so long that holding became the only posture they knew. The one whose depth was managed instead of honored, the one who learned early that the safest way to exist was to need nothing, and who carried that instruction so faithfully that it stopped feeling like a decision and started feeling like identity. Meet them here, not in the version of themselves they perform for other people, in the actual version. The one who wakes at 2 in the morning carrying a weight they've never been able to fully name. The one who has been standing at the glass for years, present and unreachable, not because something is broken, but because something is waiting. We release the armor now, not because the war wasn't real. It was real. The losses were real. The cost was real. We release it because the season it was built for is ending, and something it was never built to hold is on its way. I declare over this person that what is coming is not what has come before. It's not a more sophisticated version of what burned them. It doesn't require more vigilance or faster pattern recognition. It's something built for them specifically, in the same forge, with the same fire, and it carries the same frequency. And when they're in the same room, they'll know it the way you know something that was always true. I declare that the survival program does not have permission to override the recognition that when the alarm fires, they will have the clarity to name it as old data and the courage to stay anyway, that they will receive without converting the receiving into labor, that they will let it land. I declare that the lamp stays lit, that the room is not empty, that the light was never wasted. You are the one who chose them before there was a world to choose them in. You are the one who has been running this alignment with a precision we could not have engineered or hurried or earned by being perfect enough. We trust the design. We trust the timing. We trust that what is moving toward this person is being guided by the same hand that guided them through everything they survived to arrive at this moment. It is done. We receive it. You are the one who chose them before there was a world to choose them in. You are the one who has been holding this alignment together with a precision none of us could have engineered or hurried or earned by being good enough. So we trust the design. We trust the timing. We trust that what is moving toward this person right now is being guided by the same hand that carried them through everything they had to survive just to arrive at this moment. It is done. We receive it. Pause. I am ready, not finished. Ready. I turn forward. I clear the room. I stay when the alarm fires. I let it land. What was designed for me cannot be redirected or diluted or quietly dismantled by the opinions of people who were never part of the original blueprint. I am the frequency. I am the lamp. I am the architecture of something built with care and intention. And the one who is made to recognize that they are already moving. I am ready. Pause. Take that back with you into your life. Not a plan, not a strategy. Not a list, a posture. Stand forward. Clear the room, and when something arrives that feels nothing like what you expected because it doesn't come wrapped in drama, it doesn't cost you the way things used to cost you, it doesn't carry that familiar weight of struggle when it just feels easy in a way your nervous system doesn't quite have a category for yet, stay. That's your job. That's the whole job. And you are more prepared for it than you know. Pause. If this was for you, leave a word in the comments that names where you are right now, not where you're trying to get to. Where you are, I'll be reading. We trust the design. We trust the timing. We trust that what is moving toward this person is being guided by the same hand that guided them through everything they survived to arrive at this moment. It is done. We receive it. You are the one who chose them before there was a world to choose them in. You are the one who has been holding this alignment together with a precision none of us could have engineered or hurried or earned by being good enough. So we trust the design. We trust the timing. We trust that what is moving toward this person right now is being guided by the same hand that carried them through everything they had to survive just to arrive at this moment. It is done. We receive it. Pause. I am ready, not finished. Ready. I turn forward. I clear the room. I stay when the alarm fires. I let it land. What was designed for me cannot be redirected or diluted or quietly dismantled by the opinions of people who were never part of the original blueprint. I am the frequency. I am the lamp. I am the architecture of something built with care and intention, and the one who is made to recognize that they are already moving. I am ready. Pause. Take that back with you into your life. Not a plan, not a strategy, not a list. A posture. Stand forward. Clear the room, and when something arrives that feels nothing like what you expected because it doesn't come wrapped in drama, it doesn't cost you the way things used to cost you, it doesn't carry that familiar weight of struggle when it just feels easy in a way your nervous system doesn't quite have a category for yet, stay. That's your job. That's the whole job, and you are more prepared for it than you know. Pause. If this was for you, leave a word in the comments that names where you are right now, not where you're trying to get to. Where you are, I'll be reading.